Hi, welcome. Welcome back if you haven't been here in a while. It's wonderful to share this journey with you, this unusual journey of our lives against the backdrop of concern, of perhaps some confusion, and of frequent anxiety as we encounter the vicissitudes of COVID-19. The ongoing challenge this pandemic has presented to us is how to live our lives with some semblance of normalcy in the midst of an abnormal situation. It occurs to me that there are always extenuating circumstances in our lives that challenge our abilities, our equanimity, and our well-being. This time of COVID, however, has been unique in its universal effect, in its duration, and in the draconian measures necessary to stop its destruction. Thus, our turning to our tradition for grounding, for a sense of perspective, for a weekly focus that is both of this world and points beyond it. As we noticed last week, the Hebrew month of Elul has arrived, and with it, our thoughts turn to the high holy days that will soon be upon us. In fact, with the arrival of Elul, the holy days are really here. Long ago, our rabbis designated this month of Elul, this Hebrew month of Elul, as a special time of introspection and preparation for the serious endeavor of the days of awe themselves. Every day of this month, except for the day before Rosh Hashanah, the shofar is blown in traditional synagogues all over the world. That piercing, insistent sound demands of us, wake up to the truth of your lives, to your day-to-day reality, to the ways in which you are less than you could be, or are settling for where you are, even though you sense other directions that might be intriguing or even attractive to you. Wake up, our tradition says, in 1 month's time, in 3 weeks' time, in 2.5 weeks, and it goes day by day, you will be standing before God. You will be standing, perhaps more importantly, before yourself. What will God see? What will you see? Our sages perceive this time of preparation as perhaps the most important time of the year. Among their instructions, Rav Mata Moshe proclaimed, every person must prepare themselves for 30 days beforehand with repentance and prayer and charity for the day when they will appear in judgment before God on Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, let every person scrutinize their actions with a view to mending them. Let them seclude themselves for 1 hour every day and examine themselves. Rabbi Chaim David Azulai declared, during Elul, one should devote less time to study and more time to fixed periods of introspection and self-evaluation. That's a tall order. That's a change in focus for those for whom study was just the highest value. And so he said one should devote less time to study, more time to fixed periods of introspection and self-evaluation. This is our tradition's prescription for the month of Elul. For the second time, however, in 2 years, this is not a normal Elul. It is difficult to identify with the agenda of this month of preparation. It feels like we have spent so much time already in introspection and evaluation. We are tired. We are frustrated, and we are angry. We thought we had made an agreement. We would mask, isolate, and distance until the vaccine arrived. We kept our part of the bargain. We never imagined that we would be in extra innings at this point. Let us pause here for a moment and let us take that big breath, that let us do our break to breathe so that we might go forward with a certain sense of perhaps ease from having paused at this moment. So let us take our meditative positions, the ones that are most comfortable for us. Or if you wish to experiment with something else, be my guest. The idea is to be both alert and yet with a sense of ease. Relaxation, yes, but not to the extent of falling asleep, although falling asleep during meditation is very common for everyone, even the most practiced, even the instructors, even those who have been doing it for years and years and years. So let us plant our feet firmly on the ground. Let us find a posture that is alert, that is straight, but still with a sense of ease. Let us unhinge. Let us release all the places in our bodies that are holding on for dear life, holding on to our breath again and again and again, holding on to our necks, to our jaws, to our hands, our arms, our tummies. Sometimes we hold tension, we hold worries in our tummies, I think. I wonder if Jews are especially adept at that because we are Ashkenazic Jews, at any rate, have a higher incidence of gastrointestinal diseases than other populations. Let us wiggle our toes, our feet. And I always close my eyes. I think it's a better way of focusing just right here and not getting distracted. But if that is not your way, you may just want to gaze softly at something in the distance. Let us sit for a moment, settle ourselves, and take that first big breath. It's not really a first breath, but it's the first breath of our paying attention to it. I always love the feeling of filling up, of filling all the spaces from head to toe, of allowing myself to breathe, just to breathe in and then to let it go. In this way, just by paying attention to the breath in, slowly perhaps, fully, completely as we imagine it going to the tips of our fingers, to the backs of our necks, down to our knees, our ankles, our toes. And then letting it go. It allows us just to be here in this moment only, nowhere else. Not 30 minutes ago when we were doing something else. Not later this afternoon when we're meeting up with someone or going shopping or fixing dinner. Right now. Our breath anchors us in just this moment. It allows us to breathe in our well-being, and for this moment to breathe out our worries and our anxiety. We might breathe in with the thought, I am well. Thank God. I am well. I release my concerns. We never imagined that we would be in extra innings. The Jewish calendar, however, is insistent. It will not wait for us to get over our frustration and anger. It will not wait for the pandemic to end. The whole point of our faith is for us to know that, as the commercial used to say, we answer to a higher authority. It is precisely because our daily lives can be so all-consuming that we are commanded to observe the holy days of our year, Shabbat every week, and the holy days, festivals, and holidays in their annual cycle. The way we go about our responsibilities during this time of Elul and the holidays that follow are up to us, however. Alan Lew, Zichrono Livracha, in his book on the days of awe as a journey of transformation, entitled, "This is Real, and You Are Completely Unprepared," he offers the following interpretation of this week's Torah portion, Shoftim, which means judges, actually. He writes, the portion begins with what seems like a simple prescription for the establishment of a judicial system. Judges and officers you shall appoint for yourselves in all your gates. But the great Hasidic Torah commentary, Iturei Torah, read this passage as an imperative of a very different sort, an imperative for a kind of inner mindfulness. According to the Iturei Torah, there are 7 gates to the soul. This is based on the quotation, judges and officers, you shall appoint for yourselves in all your gates. So they took this idea of gates, these Hasidim, and they said there are 7 gates to the soul. The 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth. Everything that passes into our consciousness must enter through one of those gates. So at the deepest level, the passage cited has nothing to do with the establishment of a system of judges and courts, but deals rather with being mindful of the process of consciousness itself. This is what the Hasidim were very talented at doing, taking a phrase or a sentence or even an idea in the Torah and finding an inner meaning, an underlying meaning related to something they wanted to teach, they wanted to demonstrate. The essential act of the High Holy Day season is teshuvah, what we normally translate as repentance. But in Lew's analysis, teshuvah, repentance, teshuvah is a turning toward mindfulness. And an important step in the process is a kind of turning in to examine our perceptive mechanisms, the way we see the world. It is a shifting of our gaze from the world itself to the gates through which we see it, because the gates, the screen of our consciousness, is not just a blank, transparent medium. Rather, the gates are a world unto themselves, a world teeming with life, and that life affects what we see. And because that life makes us see the world differently, the first act of teshuvah is to look at the gates themselves. When the shofar blows on the first day of Elul, and every morning thereafter, it reminds us to turn our gaze inward and to place judgment at the gates of our consciousness, to shift our focus from the outside world to the considerable activity taking place in the gates through which we view it. Perhaps to put this idea somewhat more simply and succinctly, Lou is suggesting that the opening phrases of our Torah portion can be used to help us focus not so much on the what of our experience, the difficulty, the disappointment, the anxious moments, the nervousness, but on the how. In other words, so often when disappointment and difficulty come into our lives, we tend to tense up against them, to get angry, to find someone to blame, and to make ourselves and those near to us unhappy. If, however, we could register bad news, take a deep breath as we are learning to do, and aware of the tensing of our bodies, if we could soften around the news, if we could separate ourselves from our experience, we could deal with the disappointment, but not ruin our current reality. It would not necessarily overtake everything else. When we hear that we must wear masks again indoors, for example, our immediate reaction might be to rail against those who are not vaccinated, to complain bitterly about the experts who are supposed to be in charge, and to go off half-cocked about being told what to do. If instead we stop, acknowledge what we are feeling, and yet focus on softening around this new information, we will allow ourselves a measure of expansiveness, of perspective, and even wisdom with which to go forward in circumstances in which our anger cannot help us rectify the situation or help us in any way. There is certainly ample room in this pandemic to look at how we are if we are tired of thinking about what we are. As we talked about last week, Elul may be a time of judgment, but it is also a time of loving awareness when we invoke the concept, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine, as a symbol of God's love for the Jewish people. Let us set as an intention for this moment, for this day, for this week, for this month, for always, to hold ourselves with love. Because if we do, that is the first step in holding others with love. So this Elul, let us focus on how our gates absorb information and the world, so that we might choose the most beneficial, loving, and mindful response. Let us take our meditative positions. And let us take that breath in, into a softening inside, which is not only physical, but is mental as well. We know that our reactions shape the way our bodies respond. We know how we feel when we are worried and anxious, when we are frightened, when we are angry, when we are disappointed. But if we can register difficult news, take a breath. And then take another. And separate ourselves from what we have just heard. We might recognize we are not what we have just learned. We can react however we choose. If we can just hold off our instincts, our knee-jerk reactions, our immediate responses. Let us breathe in. As we feel an openness, a spaciousness, a goodness even, we might think of the love we carry within us. It's not just for everyone else. It is for us, first and foremost, so that we might turn it outwards. Let us hold ourselves in that embrace. Let us be aware of a softened place in which to process what the world brings to us, moment by moment. Let us breathe deeply in with gratitude and with love for every part of us. With appreciation and with understanding. And as a way of concluding our time together and to prepare ourselves for the week ahead, I would share with you this reading, this poem that appears in a volume entitled This Grateful Heart, Psalms and Prayers for a New Day. It is published by our Central Conference of American Rabbis Press. It is entitled The Season of Healing. This is the season of healing our hearts and minds, of healing the moments we share with each other and the moments we share with ourselves. This is the season of memory, of remembering our parents and grandparents, the love of generations, the holiness of our ancestors. This is the season of stillness, the season of silence and quiet, of deep breaths, of open eyes, of compassion and consolation. This is the season of healing, the season of grief turning to wonder, of loss turning toward hope, the season that binds this year to the next, the season that frees this year from the next, the season that heralds the redemption of spirit and our return to God's holy word. I'm so sorry. The season that heralds the redemption of spirit and our return to God's holy word. I wish you a week of healing, of looking at the how and not the what, of breathing deeply, and of allowing all parts of yourselves to soften around any disappointment or difficulty. I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless.